Corey Crawford still doesn't have a contract, and I am dying. Welcome to From Center Ice, the shorthanded series where it is just me, Courtney, talking to you about hockey things. And as promised, this episode is all about goaltending. Because for the Blackhawks and teams all around the league, this is the maybe most up in the air position when it comes to free agency this year. It's going to be very interesting to follow these storylines as this offseason goes along, and especially on Friday when free agency actually opens up. Now, I wanted to get this posted yesterday, but due to some difficulties, I couldn't do that. I am recording it on Wednesday, watching the second half of the draft, and there has been some goalie news since then, so I guess it's a good thing, once again, that I waited until today to actually get this up and going, because Matt Murray is officially off the board. He has been traded to the Ottawa Senators for a pick and a prospect. He really didn't get very much, so that was intriguing. He was one of the names tied to Chicago as a rumor. Earlier this week, it was out in the Twitterverse that Chicago had been kicking tires with the Penguins about a trade involving Matt Murray, and they had gotten permission to negotiate an extension with him, but that all fell through, and obviously we did not end up with Matt Murray. So it's still kind of left to be seen what our goaltending situation is going to look like, but we will talk about that in just a little bit. The thing that spurred the idea for having an all-goaltending podcast episode was Robin Lehner and the Vegas Golden Knights. Obviously, Robin Lehner was a free agency signing for the Blackhawks last summer. He signed a one-year deal, and we traded him away to the Vegas Golden Knights at the trade deadline for not very much in return. We got Malcolm Subban, who played all of 1 minute for the Blackhawks, and we got a prospect that I still don't really know too much about. I should probably do some research on him one of these days, but I just kind of forget he exists, so I don't really know what that says about him and the coverage that we've seen on him from the Chicago beat writers. So we didn't get much in return, and then, of course, going in to the playoffs, the Blackhawks weren't supposed to be there, yet they ended up there, facing Vegas in the first round, and they got kicked out by the one and only Robin Lehner. So that was frustrating. Obviously, I'm not gonna sit here and blame Chicago for trading Robin Lehner away and then losing to him in the playoffs. There's absolutely no way we should have even been sniffing a playoff spot. They didn't know that the whole shutdown was gonna happen, and then a return to play series with 24 teams bringing Chicago and Montreal into the fold as the 12th place teams in their respective conferences. So this trade really shouldn't have come back to bit us in the ass as hard as it did, other than obviously not being able to extend Robin Lehner and have him for a longer period of time than just the few months that he was with us. But there is good news for Robin and his family. He finally has some security, and he knows where he is going to be playing for the next few years, because he signed a 5-year deal with the Golden Knights for $5 million per year, and that is a fantastic contract for Robin Lehner. He has been a consistently good goaltender throughout his entire career. I got curious, so I looked up his career stats, but first of all, I will go over what he ended up doing last season. So last year in Chicago, he played 33 games for us. He went 16, 10, and 5 with a .918 save percentage and a .301 goals against average. Being a fan of the Blackhawks, I know that those numbers, even though they are good, they don't really represent what he meant to the team while he was here. He was a guy that players liked in the locker room. He seemed like a super friendly guy, someone who was determined to have success on the ice, and it was a breath of fresh air hearing real comments coming out of a hockey player post-game. And all of those character points aside, Robin Lehner was amazing on the ice. Of course, every goaltender has their off games, but he had way less of them than you would expect behind this absolutely porous defense that Chicago had. It was amazing that we even ended up in the position that we were in, and that is largely due to our goaltending. Robin Lehner and Corey Crawford both had amazing years in the blue paint for Chicago. So while it sucked seeing Lehner go, I was happy that he was going to get a chance to head into the playoffs, see what he could do to challenge for the cup, and Vegas did end up going all the way to the conference finals, eventually losing to Dallas, unfortunately. But he had a shot, and he had a really strong showing in the playoffs, so I feel like getting Robin Lehner on a deal for $5 million is an absolute steal. Of course, we are here in COVID world, so things are a bit different. There's a cap crunch with the flat cap, so I'm sure a lot of teams are going to be signing cheaper contracts. But that being said, it is still an amazing deal, and I'm happy for Robin that he finally has some security financially, and he won't have to be moving his family around for at least the next 5 years, unless, of course, there is a trade or a move there. But I don't see that happening. So congrats to Robin. And now I will let you know what his career stats are, because he is very consistent. So his career regular season stats over 301 games is a .918 save percentage. If you recall, I said in Chicago he had a .918 save percentage. And his goals against average is 2.72 over his career. So that's just shy of where he ended up with Chicago with a 301. I do have his stats from Vegas in the regular season, but he did only play 3 games, so it's a very small sample size. And he went 3-0 in that time, putting up a .940 save percentage and a 1.67 goals against average. Just absolute madness. There's no doubt he should have been their starter going into the playoffs, and Pete DeBoer made the right choice, even though maybe Marc-Andre Fleury and his agent weren't too happy about that one. But in the playoffs for Vegas, Robin played 16 games, he went 9-7, he put up a .917 save percentage and a 1.99 goals against average. So again, that save percentage coming in at .917, and on his career in the regular season, he's a .918. His career playoff numbers, in 26 games, he's gone 13-12 with a .924 save percentage and a 2.01 goals against average. Now, he has played for some very good teams in the playoffs, obviously this year with Vegas and last year with the Islanders, but they aren't that great of a team without solid netminding, and he has been a huge part of both of those teams, this year with Marc-Andre Fleury and last year with Thomas Greiss. So Robin Lehner is a fantastic goaltender, no hard feelings against him. Obviously, it's not his fault that he got moved to Vegas, and I want to see the best for him. It does suck that we lost to him in the playoffs, but if we were going to lose to anybody, I guess I'm glad that it was him. Aside from Robin, there are a ton of goalies available in free agency this year. It's like a goaltending soup. There's so many big names, it's crazy. One of them was Matt Murray, like I said, but he has been moved to Ottawa. He doesn't have an extension in place yet, as far as I know. I haven't seen one come across the Twitterverse, but I'd expect we'll get the news about that either this evening or tomorrow. Probably when the draft is over. I think their GM's probably a little busy today. But you never know. Crazier things have happened. This draft is taking years off my life with how slow and boring it's been, so maybe the GMs are working out deals in the process. So I went on Cap Friendly. I looked up the free agent goaltenders. I sorted their names by save percentage, and I'm just going to read these names off so you can see how deep the goaltending free agency pool, or soup, is this year. Anton Khudobin, obviously he lost in the Stanley Cup final with Dallas to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Cam Talbot, Jacob Markstrom, Linus Ullmark, Mackenzie Blackwood, who has been tendered a qualifying offer from New Jersey that came through today. Thomas Greiss, Kaapo Kakkonen, Alexander Georgiev, Ryan Miller, Aaron Dell, Henrik Lundqvist. He was bought out by the Rangers, and I feel like just he himself deserves his own episode. So I might even have a shorter one just about the king coming out. The rumors flying around are that he is going to sign with the Washington Capitals on Friday because of a name that you will hear further down. So we will see what happens with the king. Next up, we have Mike Smith, Craig Anderson. Matt Murray is no longer on the board. Well, kind of. He hasn't been re-signed yet. Braden Holtby, so there's that name I mentioned in ties with Henrik Lundqvist, because Washington is letting Holtby go to unrestricted free agency. I don't know what kind of move that was. I don't really blame them for going into the playoffs with Holtby, but you're letting him go for nothing. I feel like they could have at least gotten maybe something for him, but maybe not. He didn't have the best numbers this year. And then we have Matis Kivlenieks, because Columbus loves to have goaltenders with the names that are hard to say. Anton Forsberg. God, please don't bring him back to Chicago. I'm having flashbacks. Ugh. Jonas Johansson, Malcolm Subban, a Chicago name. Samuel Montembeault, Michael Hutchinson, Jimmy Howard out of Detroit, Louis Domingue, Antoine Bibeau, Keith Kincaid, Garrett Sparks, and Kazimir Kaskisuo. So that is a deep soup of goaltenders, and there are some big names on that list. It's going to be very interesting on Friday and the coming days to see where all of these guys end up. And if you pay attention to free agency or your team, if your team is the Chicago Blackhawks, if not, welcome to the podcast. I do talk about other teams. There's one name that I left off of that list when I was reading through it, because it is just too hard for me to see that name on that free agent list. And that name, number 1 in our hearts, number 50 on the back of his jersey, Corey Crawford. He is still slated to become an unrestricted free agent on Friday, and I think I just have to keep laughing to avoid crying. I don't know what the Blackhawks are planning here, what their thought process is going into this offseason. Of course, they were tied to Matt Murray. I don't know if they were just trying to get a younger goaltender, and since that didn't work out, they're going to circle back around and offer Crawford another contract. I don't know. There are no rumors coming out about it. A few weeks ago, he did say he had interest in coming back to Chicago and that he feels we still have a strong team here that can compete and a lot of promising young guys. So from what we've heard, the interest is still there on his side. Of course, that could just be lip service to the media, and he could say anything he wants to, really. But he's been here his entire career. He has his family here. He has 2 small children. So I can't really see him wanting to move on, especially since going home to Montreal isn't an option. He's stated that he does want to be a starting goaltender. He doesn't want to be a backup. He wants to play a lot of minutes. And that's just not available in Montreal because he would be playing behind Carey Price. And there's no way that would even be a 50-50 split because Montreal loves them some Carey Price. And personally, I just can't imagine him wearing a different jersey. If it does, God forbid, end up happening, it's going to be very weird, and I'm going to have another team to root for, which I'm not really looking forward to. I hope it's out in the East somewhere because I cannot handle a Western team. This is just so upsetting for me to even think about. And of course, you heard another Chicago name on that list that I read out in Malcolm Subban. He is a restricted free agent. We haven't heard if he's going to be tendered a qualifying offer or not. I believe the deadline is in about a half hour. So if they're going to, they need to make that announcement pretty soon. Again, we got Malcolm Subban in that trade for Robin Lehner. We haven't really seen what he can do, but he was the backup to Crawford in the playoffs. It wasn't one of the other 3 guys we have under contract. So I don't know if they just wanted to see what they had in him, or if they believe he really is a good goaltender. I don't really know. I did look up his numbers. So I have his stats from the past 2 seasons and then his NHL career as a whole. In the 2018-19 season with the Vegas Golden Knights, he played 21 games, went 8-10-2, had a .902 save percentage, a .293 goals against average. So that's not great, especially for a very good Vegas team. This season, he played 21 games, went 9-7-3, an .890 save percentage, significantly lower than last year, and a .317 goals against average, not too much higher than last year, but still above where he was at. He is 26 years old, and goalies notoriously take a little bit longer to develop, so I don't know if he will get better, if he's just kind of stuck in the middle here, or if he'll end up being an American League goaltender. We really don't know. And I guess if the Blackhawks do re-sign him, he could always end up in Rockford. We just don't know. So for his career, he's played 66 games in the NHL. He's gone 30, 23, and 7. So he's won as many games as he's lost, but he has picked up those 7 points from overtime or shootout losses. He has an .899 save percentage and a .297 goals against average. Not terrible numbers for a backup goaltender, but with the atrocious defense that the Blackhawks have, I don't see that working out well in the long run. Unless he really does come back and he has improved his game, you can look at it as he's only 26 or he's already 26. I don't know. I don't know that I would re-sign him with the 3 guys that we already have under contract, plus the amount of goalies there are in free agency. I don't know. But you do already have his rights, so if the coaches saw something in him that they like while he was here, you could try him out on a 1 or 2 year deal. He could always be a goaltender that's put up for the expansion draft once Seattle comes into the league next year. There's a few options they have here. So since I looked up Subban's stats, I went ahead and looked up the rest of our guys as well. So the 3 guys we have under contract still are Colin Delia, who is also 26 years old, Kevin Lankinen at 25 years old, and Matt Tompkins, who is 26 years old. I didn't realize he was that old. Since he's consistently been behind Delia and Lankinen, I just kind of assumed he was younger in my head. But he isn't, 26, so the guys we have under contract all really kind of have that age range in common. So for the last 2 years for Delia, in the 2018-19 NHL season, he played 16 games, he went 6-4-3, had a .908 save percentage, and a .361 goals against average. And I feel like those numbers don't really tell the whole story for him. That was a very bad Blackhawks team. That was the year we had Cam Ward, we had Jeff Glass. It was just a rotating cast of goaltenders in net because Crawford was injured. In the American League that year with the Ice Hogs, Delia played 26 games. He went 13-12-4 with a .922 save percentage and a 2.48 goals against average. So much better numbers. And of course, that's the difference between the NHL and the AHL, but he's consistently been a solid goaltender for the Ice Hogs since he came up from the ECHL. This past season with Rockford, he played 32 games, had a .912 save percentage, and a .266 goals against average. So the numbers were a bit worse than the 2018-19 campaign, but this season's team was also not that great, and he had a very rough start to the season. Instead of making those good athletic saves that we love to see out of Colin, he was just more so putting himself out of position. And he's one of those goaltenders that really relies on the mental game. He's sort of like Crawford in that way, that after a bad goal, he can just brush it off and bounce back. And we weren't seeing that at the beginning of this season. If you've been listening to this podcast, you've heard Jacqueline and I talking about how Colin just really didn't look like himself and we didn't know what was going on. And then it came out later that his girlfriend, who was pregnant, was having a really rough go of pregnancy, and thankfully their precious little baby was born with no problems, so that's good. And so it was kind of rumored that maybe his poor playing streak was due to maybe lack of sleep or being stressed out because of that, and that's something that you really cannot blame him for. The good news is that during the second half of the season, he really turned it on. And he took that starting role back from Kevin Lankinen, who had a pretty poor half of the season in the second half and also struggled with some injury troubles. So Colin started looking more like himself at the end of that season, which we can only assume he would carry into next season as well, whenever that starts. At least for the NHL, what we've heard most recently from Gary Bettman yesterday is they're planning and hoping for a January 1 start, but that's obviously still up in the air, and we won't know until they nail it down for sure. For the American League, who knows? That's a league that definitely relies on butts in seats to make money. If they can't have fans in the arena, I don't really know what they're going to do. So that's going to be an interesting storyline to follow as well. Obviously, I want them to come back as soon as possible. I miss watching the Ice Hogs so bad, and I miss going to games. The season will probably return before we can return to the BMO, but I just miss them. I want to see them back out on the ice. It was great being able to watch the Blackhawks in the playoffs, but I miss my Ice Piggies a lot. The next goaltender up is Kevin Lankinen. He's 25, like I said. He won gold at Worlds in 2019. So obviously a solid goaltender, a good guy to have in the system, and he started off the year in Rockford really strong. It was noticeable that he had really taken a step forward in his progression as a goaltender, and it was really fun to watch, and then it just kind of spiraled out of control from there. There were injury problems. I believe his shoulder was injured, and the season just kind of went downhill for him. But with all this time off to recover, I feel like Kevin can come back and have a really strong showing, which is likely going to be with Rockford whenever the AHL does return. In the 2018-19 season, he played 19 games with the Ice Hogs. He went 7-12-1 with a .910 save percentage and a 2.50 goals against average. Not terrible numbers, not a great record, but again, not a very good Ice Hogs team. This past season, he played 21 games. He went 8-10-2 with a .909 save percentage and a 3.03 goals against average. So the goals against average significantly higher by about 0.5 points. His save percentage is around the same, .909 compared to .910, so he's pretty consistent there. Record, again, not that great, but this season was very up and down for the Ice Hogs. Not a great team out there. I think we had a lot of great guys. They just couldn't really put it together every night and play cohesively. So while I don't see Kevin making the NHL for the 2020-21 season, or just the 2021 season if they do come back January 1st, I am very interested to see the progression that he makes in the American League and how he plays for the Ice Hogs. Our final goalie that we have under contract right now is Matt Tompkins at 26 years old. This past regular season was his first full-time in the American League. He played backup and spot duty for Delia and Lankinen. But from what we saw of him in the 2018-19 season when he was up for just a couple games, he definitely made a lot of improvements down in Indy. So this season he played 13 games for the Ice Hogs. He went 5-7-1 with an .896 save percentage and a 3.12 goals against average. So not the best numbers, but he did only play 13 games, and this year's Ice Hogs were very good at giving up high danger chances and letting leads slip away. So with only that small sample size, I'm not going to judge his pro game just yet. He did make a lot of improvements, like I said, coming into this season. He looked really solid in net. He looked like he could square up to shooters, find pucks in traffic. He wasn't, this is probably the least technical word I could say, he wasn't very messy in net. By watching goaltenders, you could probably guess what that means. He wasn't just sliding all over the place for no real reason. He just had a very solid and calm game. So if the Blackhawks don't end up re-signing Malcolm Subban, I would love to see Kevin Lankinen and Matt Tompkins taking on goaltending duty down here in Rockford. I would love to see Delia finally get his shot as a full-time backup in Chicago. And of course, knowing me, knowing this podcast, I want Corey Crawford back in net for the Chicago Blackhawks. I want him to retire a Blackhawk. I want that number 50 up in the rafters. I don't care if you think that's crazy. It's what I want. He has been notoriously underrated his entire career. He's been nothing but solid for the Blackhawks, and he's just been shit on around every corner, mostly from his very own fan base. But even in the media and top goaltending lists, it only hasn't been until the last few years that he's actually got some recognition for being one of the better goaltenders and most consistent goaltenders in the league. And yes, he has suffered from some concussion issues and injuries in the past, but that's why you have a backup, and that's why you build a goaltending pipeline. They are there to come in when your number one guy goes down with an injury, because this is hockey, this is sports. Injuries are going to happen. So the longer this goes on without Crawford getting a contract, the more nervous, the more scared, the more brain jumbly I become. So this episode probably sounds just completely rambly and all over the place, but if you could call up Mr. Stan Bowman and make him sign my goaltender, then the next one will be a lot more structured and put together, because my brain is currently not structured and very put together, because my goaltending is very up in the air, and the only guys that we have under contract right now are AHL level goaltenders or a solid backup in Colin Delia. So I am not okay. And I don't think they even have the cap space to go out and get one of those high-end free agent goaltenders anyway. So, I am not okay. Not okay. Since I brought you the statistics for the other goaltenders that we have, of course, I am here to talk to you about Corey Crawford and his career numbers. In the regular season, he has played 488 games for the Chicago Blackhawks. He's gone 260, 162, and 53. So he has won 260 games. He has lost in regulation 162. And he has lost in overtime or a shootout 53. He has a .918 save percentage. Say hello to Robin Lehner again. Both of these guys very consistent with that .918 save percentage. And a .245 goals against average. So if you're going to sit here and sing Robin Lehner's praises, as you should, he's a very good goaltender, you cannot then continue to put down Corey Crawford when he has similar numbers and more accomplishments. Yes, Lehner was on some horrible teams in Ottawa and Buffalo, but he hasn't won anything. Corey has. What has Corey won? Well, he has 2 Stanley Cups, of course, in 2013, where he should have been the Conn Smythe winner, and in 2015 against the Tampa Bay Lightning, where he got a shutout in that Game 6 to win the Cup. He also has 2 Jennings trophies, which are for allowing the fewest goals with a minimum of 25 games played. He won it in 2013, where he tied with his goalie tandem partner, Ray Emery. R.I.P. Ray, we miss you dearly. And in 2015, he tied for the Jennings Trophy with someone that the hockey world tends to love. And I mentioned his name earlier, and that would be the guy up in Montreal, Carey Price. So, I'm not here to listen to any of this Crawford hate any longer. Here are his playoff stats. He has played 96 games in the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. He has a .918 save percentage. He is nothing if not consistent, and a .238 goals against average. He is a solid goaltender. He is a consistent goaltender. He is not a flashy goaltender. He relies heavily on his positioning, and it works out well for him. He's just there to make the saves that he should make, and then he comes out of nowhere and makes ridiculous saves that you just kind of throw your hands in the air, asking how the hell did that puck not go in the net? So my message to you is, Corey Crawford is an elite goaltender. Yes, he is going to be 36 this December. I understand that is getting up there in age, but we have seen older goalies do more and win the cup. it doesn't make any sense to me to not bring Crawford back, especially not having a bunch of cap space to throw at some of these other free agent goalies. Maybe they would look great in the Hawks jersey. They probably would, especially if you are one of those fans that thinks that this team in front of the goaltender is very bad, which I wouldn't argue with you. I think they're making improvements, but they are not great, especially on defense. This guy has dragged their corpses kicking and screaming to more wins than he should have, and he's really been the heartbeat of this team for a long time. And yes, that means over Jonathan Toews, over Patrick Kane, over Duncan Keith. I don't care if you think I'm crazy. It's true. Those guys are all amazing players as well, and I'm very glad that we have them. Don't get me wrong, I'm not sitting here saying those guys are bad hockey players. What I am saying is that Crawford has consistently bailed these guys out, and they've done the same for him. Obviously, you need that goal support up front. But if we bring in another guy, I don't see it getting any better. This defense is not good. They don't play as a team. I don't know if that also has to do with the system, but during the second half of this season, they did come out and they were a lot better. And they were one of the highest point-getting teams in the league when it comes to the standings. So I would personally go into next season having Corey Crawford and Colin Delia up in Chicago. I would have Kevin Lankinen and Matt Tompkins holding down net duty in Rockford. And if they do want to sign a third guy, go for one of the not so expensive free agents, or make a trade for a solid backup goaltender, or a guy who can go between Rockford and Chicago if needed. But where Chicago sits right now, the only goaltenders under contract are Delia, Lankinen, and Tompkins. Everything else is up in the air. We have no idea. We did just draft a goaltender in the second round today. He is not going to be ready next season, so don't get your hopes up for that. He is going to college, but he's going to be a really exciting prospect to follow and look forward to in the future. I don't know anything about him at this moment other than the few bits and pieces that I've read. But from what I have read, he is somebody that we should be looking forward to, and I will look further into him and everybody else that we have drafted. So because this is 2020 and we are in October right now instead of being in the summer, free agency opens this Friday, October 9th, instead of your normal July 1st. If neither Subban or Crawford are signed by then, they will become free agents. We could circle back to them after that and sign them to contracts, of course. We aren't banned from signing them once Friday rolls around. It just means they are allowed to talk to other teams and they can sign with whoever they want, especially if Subban doesn't get a qualifying offer from Chicago. Actually, let me check right now to see if any of that news has come through since the deadline is coming up. I am not seeing anything yet, so it just either hasn't come across the Twitterverse, or they haven't given him an offer yet, or they're just not going to. So if that's the case, he would be an unrestricted free agent on Friday, along with Crawford, and then it's really up in the air what the hell our goaltending situation is going to look like. We can only hope that Stan and company have a plan in place, and they know what they're doing. Otherwise, I am extremely confused, and instead of making any improvements in this offseason, we are going to take a drastic step back. In this past regular season, our goaltenders were the only ones carrying us through for a majority of that time, and the only reason that we even made it into 12th place in our conference to be able to take part in the playoffs. And yes, maybe a lot of people didn't want to be involved in the playoffs so we could get better draft picks, but we do have a new young core of players coming up, and they need that experience. So it's a good thing they played against some tough teams. Edmonton with their speed and scoring at will ability, and then Vegas just with their incredible depth that they have on the roster. We played two very different teams, and our young guys got a taste of both of those, so I think it was good. Now we just really need to figure out this goaltending situation, if not for our roster and our players, for my peace of mind. Otherwise, these podcast episodes are going to get increasingly more insane as time keeps moving on. So if they could just please today sign Corey Crawford to a contract so I can rest peacefully and gather my thoughts on everything else. That would be great. I just don't know. Next up, I'm just going to watch the rest of the draft, and then I'm going to do some research into the guys that Bowman and crew have decided to draft this year. So that is it for this goaltending episode. I hope the next time we chat, things are a little less chaotic on the goaltending side of the Blackhawks roster, but probably won't be, because that's how these things go. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please head on over to iTunes and give us a rating and a review. That would make my heart very happy. Hopefully a 5-star review. If not, that's up to you as well. And I will catch y'all in the next episode. Bye! Thank you all for watching. Please hit that subscribe button to catch more From Center Ice content. If you could, hit the like button on this video, maybe share it with a friend or two. And while you're here, check out the podcast playlist and catch up on some old episodes. We will catch y'all next time. Bye!